Alright, so lesson 3 is over energy and matter. Vocab, we only have 3 for this one. There's 5 in the book, but we already did 2 of those. So, producer changes the energy available in their environment into food. A consumer cannot make their own energy, and they get their food by eating other organisms or consuming other organisms. And an energy pyramid shows the amount of energy available at each step in a food chain. Organisms and energy. We classify organisms by the way they get their energy, right? Consumers have to consume to get their energy. Producers can produce their own energy. That's where that comes from. All energy comes from the sun. We know that. We've talked about that before. Energy is never created or destroyed. It's only transforms between different forms. This is an important idea. It's a little more abstract, a little difficult to wrap your head around, but we need to start thinking about energy in that way. Producers and consumers. Producers, like plants, algae, microorganisms, they use the sun to produce energy. There are a small number that get their energy from different sources. Things that live in the deep parts of the ocean by volcanoes can get their energy from the heat coming off the volcanoes. But for the most part, almost everything gets its energy from the sun. Consumers. We have 4 different types of consumers: herbivores, omnivores, carnivores, and detritivores, or decomposers. I think you guys probably have talked about these before. Herbivores eat plants, right? Carnivores eat only meat. So our example here would be this wolf. Omnivores eat both plants and meat. Bears, I know probably we think more about them eating mostly meat, but they can also eat plants and nuts and things like that. Detritivores, this means where they're eating the waste or breaking other things down. Our example here would be a worm, but there are a lot of other examples that I think you guys know. Energy pyramids. More energy at the base of the pyramid. This is where the producers are found. Each step up only retains 10% of the level below it. So this would be our example of an energy pyramid. We can see down here the producers start at 100% of the energy. When we go to our primary consumers, which is our first step, they only contain 10% of the initial energy that the producers have. The secondary consumers, only 10% of the level below them, so 10% of 10 would be 1. And then we go to the third level consumers. They only contain 10% of the level below them, so they're at 0.1. And the fourth level consumers, 10% of the level below them, so they're at 0.01. So energy does not transfer very well. It's not very efficient. Matter cycle. Matter is the stuff that makes up the entire world. Matter is under the same way, or you need to think about matter the same way we think about energy. Matter isn't created or destroyed, but is transferred through the environment, like energy. It gets used again and again in different parts of the ecosystem. Matter is constantly changing form. It's always changing. So we're going to talk about 3 different types of cycles. The first one we're going to talk about is the water cycle. Water can be found in 3 forms on Earth. Liquid, which would be the water we think of, solid, which is ice, and gas, which is water vapor. First step in the water cycle, evaporation from lakes, oceans, streams, puddles, whatever it might be, takes water into the atmosphere. Second step, condensation occurs when air rises and cools. This causes precipitation to form and fall. And our third step, water moves across the Earth's surface as runoff to streams, etc. It can also be absorbed into the Earth, into the aquifers, or whatever it might be. After that, the cycle repeats, and we'll see a picture of this in just a second. So here's our water cycle picture, right? We have evaporation occurring here, evaporation occurring here. Here we see something, it's kind of hard to read, but it says transpiration. That's essentially the evaporation of water out of a tree. Sublimation is the change from ice to water vapor. So all of these arrows that point up mean that we have water going to water vapor or ice going to water vapor, and that water vapor is in the atmosphere. So once it's in the atmosphere, it starts to rise. After it rises, we have this condensation occurring here, right? We see condensation here. When that condensation happens, it gets heavier, it starts to get more dense, and then we have precipitation happen. So the precipitation would be the rain or the snow or whatever it might be, sleet, and that brings it back down to Earth. Once it gets back down to Earth, we see here's the snow melt and the surface flow. So we have the water moving back to either the lake or the pond or the ocean, or in some cases it can be taken up by the plant. After that happens, we start the evaporation or the sublimation part again. So it's those three steps that just cycle over and over and over. So that water is always being used. The oxygen cycle. Photosynthesis produces oxygen. The oxygen is used in cellular respiration, which produces CO2. The CO2 is used in photosynthesis to make oxygen. We've talked about this before, so hopefully this isn't new for us. And here's our picture, right? We have our plant is going to produce the oxygen through photosynthesis, and it needs the carbon dioxide to do this. So here we have the plant producing oxygen, animal takes in oxygen, animal releases carbon dioxide after cellular respiration, plant takes in the carbon dioxide, and then we just cycle through that. The carbon cycle. Carbon is the building block of all life on Earth. It's going to be important. Carbon is the building block of all life on Earth. Producers use carbon in the atmosphere to make food for themselves. Consumers eat the producers and release carbon back to the atmosphere in the form of gas, either farts, burps, whatever it might be. That carbon comes back out. It can be through urine or feces, but that carbon comes back out. There are more routes for carbon. There are a lot more carbon routes in the cycle. Here we see a picture. We have CO2 in the air. Photosynthesis takes it in. We have dead organisms and waste. They produce, or they're a source of carbon. Plants, the respiration. They also, remember that plants also undergo cellular respiration, so they produce CO2 as well. We, as a species, humans, make a lot of CO2. We know that. It's one of the big pollution things that we talk about or hear about all the time.